So is James Milner right in what he's saying about Brighton and Hove Albion and the season they've had so far? We're going to get into that today. Welcome back to Seagull Central. My name is Adam MacDonald and this is my YouTube channel. If you've been here before and you're coming back, thank you very much. I appreciate you. And if this is the first time you found one of my videos, thank you so much. If you enjoy this kind of content, you're a massive Brighton fan. If you've been here before and you haven't already done this, hit the subscribe button, turn your notifications on. It means you'll never miss a video. You'll be the first and fastest to all the best breaking, in-depth, regular Brighton news out there on social media. And I'll be very thankful for that to you because it means a lot. Right, let's get into it. James Milner's been speaking over the international break. He's been speaking to the Argus. He's been speaking to the legend that is Brian Owen, talking about Brighton's season, talking about many things. He spoke about mitoma, he spoke about Belabour, maybe the fact that both of those haven't had the best start of the season. Spoke about the manager, he spoke about various things. But some quotes really stood out, him talking about kind of his assessment of the season so far. What are we kind of 8, 9, 10 games in-ish, second international break, a good stock take moment. And he's kind of given his take on where Brighton are, where we are after the first phase of the season, as we kind of get, almost a quarter of the way into the season-ish. I think probably, it's the kind of accepted narrative that maybe after kind of 8, 9, 10 games, that's when you can really judge a season. And that's where you kind of get a bit of a gauge of how a team's going to do, if a team's going to be fighting for relegation, if a team's going to be in the top half, fighting for top 6. I would say based on what we've seen so far, this looks like a season where Brighton are going to probably secure a top half finish. It might be a little bit like that kind of final De Zerbi season where we end up kind of playing quite well, looking quite good, but actually end up finishing 11th in that season. I think we might be finishing anywhere between like 8th and 12th this season. I think, to be honest, the ambition at the start of the season maybe had been a bit higher than that. I was talking finishing 5th, European spots. I still think that's on, personally. I think from what we've seen so far, the data would suggest it's looking a little bit more like it's going to be kind of 8th to 12th. I'd love to know whether you agree or disagree with that. So James Milner's come out, and this was kind of his assessment. Let me read it back to you. Let me see what you think of it, and then we'll get stuck into it. So James Milner says, I think he was actually asked kind of, what's your assessment of the season so far? I think slightly disappointing for me, he says, for where we could be. We've shown we can beat anyone on our day. We have that ability. The next step for us, which is normal for a team striving to get to the next level, the biggest thing is obviously consistency. And that's something we haven't quite got right yet. That goes to the young players as well. We've signed a lot of young players. We've signed a lot of them in the summer. So there are reasons for that. It's not excuses. There are reasons why we haven't been able to make that next step we'd like to take. But we're all aware it's a step that we need to take. It'll be more difficult the other way. If we didn't have the ability to put in the performances that we know we can and beat everyone on our day, we know we can do that. It's not easy to take that step by any means, showing our best level 9 times out of 10, but that's the step we need to get to, the step we need to take. Which I do agree with. I think what he's saying there is, look, we've got the players, and that's kind of what's frustrating, the fact it's probably been a bit of a disappointing start. He's brandished it a disappointing start to the season. Is he right about that? I would say probably. I think if you're a professional, if you're someone like him who is a winner, who's achieved great things in your career, when you start a season like this, it's a little bit slow. You probably do feel a bit disappointed. When you compare it to the levels that Brighton are operating at in terms of the quality of players that they've brought in, the squad quality, I think you have to say it probably is slightly disappointing, and I think he is right. For me, it's kind of a similar argument that I've made around Brighton and how I feel around Brighton this season. My personal view is that I think we've got a very talented squad. I think we've got some very good players. And I feel like, I don't know if it's the manager, I don't know if it's the system, I don't really know what it is. I feel like we should be getting more out of this team than we are. Think about the quality we've got in attack particularly. Players like Minteh, Rutter, Mitoma, the defence, Jan-Paul van Hekken, Buscagli, Coppola, Dunk, Ferdy, De Kuyper, a very decent keeper by all accounts. We're just not quite seeing the best of him at the moment. I feel like we should be in games, kind of being a Belabour as well. I feel like in games we should be seeing a more consistent Brighton. I think what we've seen so far this season is a side that will either play a brilliant first half and then look quite poor in the second half, or the flip side. And I think this is what we've seen more often, which is starting games quite badly. First half's looking quite poor. We saw it in the most recent game against Wolves. A pretty poor, pretty shocking first half. Second half, we kind of turned the key a little bit and engaged some of those better players, the better moments a little bit more, maybe through desperation, maybe through whatever it was, we're able to get a result and kind of turn up the way we play a little bit. James Milner says we've shown we can beat anyone on our day. We have that ability. And I think that's obviously true with Brighton. The story for Brighton fans over the last kind of 3, 4, 5, 6 years, 7, 8 years since we've been in the Premier League is we're very good against the big sides. I've always said you kind of weirdly back yourself more when Brighton are playing against a big 6 team, home or away, than you do against a team at the bottom side. But I think for Brighton, what they need to try and do, what this side needs to try and do is not only find that consistency in first versus second half matches, but also game by game. It's all very well kind of playing brilliantly against the big sides, but not being able to do it. It's not valuable if you can't do it against the quote unquote lesser sides. And if Brighton do want to take that next step, they've got to fix that. For me, it comes back to this again. James Milner says we have young players. We signed a lot of new players in the summer. There are reasons for why things are a bit more difficult at the start of this season. I take that point. My personal view is, if I'm being completely honest, I think Brighton, I think these players don't look like they're being, and I will eat humble pie the day I need to eat humble pie, but the day's not come yet, I don't think. I don't think these players are, at least with my eye test, and tell me if you're seeing something differently, I don't think these players are being coached in a way that gets the best out of them. I just don't see it. And it's not a personal thing against hurzeler, because I quite like the bloke. It's not really against him, but I do feel like when James Milner says something like, we've shown we have that ability, we need to take that next step. What was the other bit there? So if we didn't have the ability to put in the performances, it would be more difficult, which is true. It's like we know we have this ability, yet we're an awfully inconsistent side, or a side that lacks mettle in moments. We're a side who just don't look like we have a certain way to play. I don't know. So I think James Milner's absolutely right. I think if we want to take, in his words, the next step, we have to integrate the young players quicker. We have to maybe have players that are primed and ready to go, but also we need to find that consistency game by game. You can't rely on doing pretty poorly against your Wolves and your Leeds and what have you, and then go and beat Man City, go and beat Chelsea, go and beat all of these other teams. I suppose that's kind of what we've done in recent seasons, but I think if you think back to that season in 22-23 where we finished 6th, we were able to be clinical. Think about Southampton at home. Think about many of the big games against relegation fodder at home. Brighton got results against them. And I think we're seeing this season, I don't know, I think for this season, it's not necessarily results. And I think, someone commented on my video a few weeks ago, it might have been after the Wolves game, saying, I think you're focusing too much on the results. I think you're focusing too much on the result against Wolves. 1-1 is disappointing, and not the performance, where the performance is really good. And to me, that was just completely the opposite of how I think. I personally think the result against Wolves away, that's kind of an okay result. That's fine. For me, it's the performances. I just don't see the performances of a side who are trying to finish top 6, who are trying to finish in European places. I don't see that. I see a side who look pretty weak physically, but also weak kind of on the counter-attack, weak in transition, a side who don't really have, when they're attacking, kind of clear ideas in terms of how they're playing, patterns of play. So I think James Milner is right, and I think he'll be used to a completely different kind of standard, and maybe for him it's quite surprising and interesting coming into a side like this, having to kind of readapt his expectations. But I think having a player like him in the side is massively important. And, make no mistake, I think he's actually been pretty decent. I think obviously due to his age and due to the fact that he's not getting any younger, and the fact that he kind of doesn't really have a set position, he can play midfield, he can play at fullback, he can play wherever. I think people probably do kind of pin him as some of the kind of, bloody hell, Milner's playing again. Oh, he's playing a shocker. I actually think he's been pretty decent. I think about Bournemouth away, I thought he was very decent. I think we've seen him in some home games as well. I think he's looked very good for his age. And I will admit, I find it a bit annoying when we get to the 70th, 80th minute and you want a game changer and he seems to bring Milner on. I think that's a bit silly. But I think if you're going to have games where he plays from the start, I back it. I think that's okay. I think that works. So for me, do I think James Milner's right? I do think he's right. He says it's a slightly disappointing start to the season for where we could be. That's it summed up, for where we could be, for where we all thought we were going to be, for everything we saw about the players and the signings. It is slightly disappointing. Can we turn it around? Absolutely. Do I still back Brighton to finish in the European places? I will say on record now, yes, I do. But also, I think if we're being really realistic, I think that may be 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th position. is maybe a little bit more in kind of the bracket that we're likely to finish in, which, make no mistake, would be a fantastic result. You've got to remember, I always say it, finish 17th on goal difference, staying in the Premier League for another season. Ultimately, in my opinion, I know it will feel frustrating in the moment, but when you look back on it, another season in the Premier League for Brighton is a good season. I think we've all got to remember that. Thank you very much for watching. Let me know what you think. Do you agree or disagree with James Milner? Has it been a slightly disappointing season for you? Is he right what he says about the new signings and the young players, around how that's kind of a reason why maybe it's taken us a little bit longer to bed into this season? Let me know. What would you like to see over the next kind of couple of games when we come back on Saturday, Newcastle at home? How would you like to see the side line up? Would you like to see any big changes? What would you like to see? Thank you very much for watching. If you haven't already, please hit the subscribe button, turn your notifications on, get in the likes, get in the comments, and let me know you are part of this fastest growing Brighton and Hove Albion fan community on YouTube. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you on the next video. And as always, up the Albion.